She was told women couldn't be snipers, that combat was men's work, that her place was in factories or hospitals, not on the front lines. That precision shooting required strength and coldness women didn't possess. But when Corporal Lyudmila Pavlichenko, a 24-year-old history student from Kiev, squeezed the trigger on her Mosin Nagant rifle for the first time on August 15, 1941, the enemy broke not through bullets alone, but through something far more unexpected. They expected Soviet resistance. They met calculated lethality. They braced for standard infantry tactics. They faced a woman who would become their nightmare. One shooter, concealed in rubble outside Odessa, whispered range calculations as German officers moved through her scope. Her voice was steady, her hands didn't tremble. She had spent 6 weeks fighting for permission to deploy, had endured mockery and doubt, had survived attempts to redirect her to nursing. But what waited beyond that first confirmed kill was not acceptance at all. It was the beginning of something that would shatter everything both armies thought they knew about women in combat, about the nature of warfare, and about the price one person could extract from an enemy that never saw her coming. Before we continue with this incredible story, if you appreciate these deep dives into untold history, please hit that like button and subscribe. These stories deserve to be remembered, and your support helps us bring them to light. Operation Barbarossa had begun 2 months earlier. On June 22, 1941, Nazi Germany launched the largest invasion in military history. Over 3 million men, 600,000 vehicles, 3,600 tanks, 7,000 artillery pieces, sweeping across Soviet borders in a massive offensive designed to crush the USSR in a matter of weeks. The initial success was catastrophic for the Soviets. Entire armies were encircled and destroyed, cities fell, millions of soldiers were killed or captured. The Wehrmacht seemed unstoppable, pushing deep into Soviet territory with mechanized precision. By August 1941, the southern front was collapsing. German forces were advancing toward Odessa, the crucial Black Sea port. The city's fall seemed inevitable. Soviet commanders were desperate for every soldier, every rifle, every person who could slow the German advance, even slightly. But even in that desperation, military tradition held firm. Combat roles were for men. Women could serve as nurses, radio operators, support personnel, but not as infantry, not as snipers, not in positions where they would kill face to face with the enemy. Lyudmila Pavlichenko had never accepted those limitations. Born in 1916 in a small Ukrainian village, she had grown up during the chaos of revolution and civil war. Her family moved to Kiev when she was young. She excelled in school, particularly in history. She enrolled at Kiev University in 1937, planning to become a historian, to teach, to build a quiet academic life. But alongside her studies, she pursued an unusual hobby: shooting. The Soviet Union, preparing for potential conflict, encouraged civilians to learn marksmanship through shooting clubs. Lyudmila joined one at age 14. By her 20s, she was an exceptional marksman: steady hands, sharp eyes, natural ability to calculate wind and distance. When Germany invaded, Lyudmila was in her 4th year at university. She was married, had a young son, had every reason to evacuate or take a safe rear echelon role. But watching the invasion unfold, seeing German forces destroy everything in their path, she made a different choice. She went to the recruitment office and volunteered for infantry service. The recruiting sergeant looked at this young woman in civilian clothes and laughed. "We need nurses. We have plenty of soldiers." "I'm not offering to be a nurse," Lyudmila said. "I'm offering to be a sniper. I can shoot better than most of your men." The sergeant's expression shifted from amusement to annoyance. "Women don't fight. Go to the hospital corps." Lyudmila had anticipated this. She pulled out her marksman certifications from the shooting club. Competition records. Scores that would have qualified any man instantly. "Test me," she said. "1 rifle, 1 demonstration. If I fail, I'll go to the hospitals. If I pass, you give me a position." The sergeant, perhaps intrigued by her audacity or simply wanting to prove her wrong, agreed. They went to a training range. He handed her a standard Mosin Nagant rifle, the weapons Soviet snipers would use throughout the war. Hit that target at 300 meters, center mass, 3 shots. Lyudmila took the rifle, felt its weight, checked the sight alignment. The rifle was poorly maintained, the sights slightly off. She made mental adjustments for the deviation. Then she fired. 3 shots, each within a hand's width of dead center. The sergeant stared at the target, then at her. "That was luck," he said. "Then give me another test." Lyudmila replied calmly. He did. 5 more tests, increasing difficulty, moving targets, wind corrections, different ranges. Lyudmila passed every one. Not perfectly. Some shots were slightly off, but well enough to prove this wasn't luck. This was skill, developed through years of practice, refined through discipline and natural talent. The sergeant had no choice. He approved her enlistment. Lyudmila Pavlichenko became one of the first women officially assigned to a Soviet sniper role. But approval from one sergeant didn't mean acceptance from the army. When Lyudmila arrived at the 25th Rifle Division near Odessa in early August, the male soldiers' reactions ranged from amusement to outright hostility. A woman in combat with a rifle, claiming to be a sniper? It was absurd. Some thought it was propaganda, a morale stunt that would last until the first German attack. Others resented her presence, believing she would be a distraction or liability. Her commanding officer assigned her to a position, but made it clear, "You'll stay in rear positions, observation only. We can't risk—" "I didn't come here to observe," Lyudmila interrupted. "I came here to fight." The officer sighed. "Fine. First engagement, you can take a shot. If you miss, or if you freeze, you're done. Reassigned to support roles. Understood?" Lyudmila nodded. She understood perfectly. She would get one chance, one shot to prove she belonged. One opportunity to silence every doubt, every condescending smile, every assumption about what women could or couldn't do in combat. The pressure was crushing, but she had lived with pressure. She had fought for this chance, and she wouldn't waste it. The opportunity came on August the 15th, 1941. German forces were advancing through the outskirts of Odessa. Lyudmila's unit was defending a position near a partially destroyed building complex. German officers were visible approximately 400 meters away, coordinating an assault. The Soviet forces were preparing to withdraw. It was chaos, artillery fire, smoke, shouting soldiers, the grinding sound of approaching tanks. Lyudmila took position in the rubble, setting up her rifle with practiced efficiency. Her spotter, a veteran soldier who clearly resented being assigned to babysit a woman, lay beside her. "You've never shot at a person before," he said. "It's different from targets. When you see a man in your scope, when you realize you're about to end a life, most freeze. It's natural. Don't feel bad when it happens." Lyudmila ignored him. She focused on the German officers, watching their movement patterns, calculating range and wind. One officer stood still for several seconds, examining a map. Perfect. She adjusted her sight picture, controlled her breathing, felt her heartbeat slow. The moment between heartbeats, the stillness before the shot. Everything she had trained for compressed into one decision. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. 400 meters away, the German officer dropped. Clean hit. He didn't move again. The spotter stared through his binoculars. You actually hit him." His voice carried shocked respect. "That's what snipers do," Lyudmila said calmly. She chambered another round, searching for the next target. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was controlled. She felt no hesitation, no moral crisis, no freeze. She felt purpose. This was what she had trained for. This was what she was good at. And this was how she would contribute to stopping the invasion that was destroying her homeland. Over the next 2 days, Lyudmila recorded 4 more confirmed kills. Each shot was precise, calculated, lethal. The soldiers who had mocked her fell silent. Her commanding officer stopped trying to reassign her. Word began spreading through the division. There was a woman sniper, and she was effective. Not lucky, not adequate, effective. The distinction mattered, but effectiveness came with a price. Soviet military doctrine valued sniper kills, tracking them as measures of combat efficiency. Lyudmila's kills were recorded, reported up the chain of command, and someone in the propaganda apparatus recognized opportunity. A woman sniper, achieving confirmed kills, could be powerful propaganda, proof that Soviet women were contributing to the patriotic defense, proof that the USSR's commitment to equality wasn't just political rhetoric, but combat reality. By September, Lyudmila's name was appearing in Soviet newspapers. Lady Death, some called her. The terror of Germans, wrote others. She hated the nicknames. She wasn't performing, she was fighting. But the attention was unavoidable. The attention brought pressure of a different kind. Now she wasn't just representing herself, she was representing all women who wanted to prove they could fight. Every shot had to count, every mission had to succeed. Because failure wouldn't just be her failure, it would be used as evidence that women didn't belong in combat, that the experiment had failed, that tradition had been right all along. The weight of that responsibility was almost unbearable. By October 1941, as the siege of Odessa intensified, Lyudmila's confirmed kill count had reached 32. She operated primarily at night, moving through ruined buildings, taking positions in rubble, waiting hours for the perfect shot. Her patience was legendary. She would lie motionless for 8, 10, 12 hours, waiting for a German officer or NCO to present a target. Then one shot, one kill. Then relocate before German counter-snipers could fix her position. The Germans began to realize they had a problem. Officers were being killed with disturbing regularity in certain sectors. Counter-sniper teams were deployed. German snipers, experienced professionals who had fought in Poland and France, were tasked with finding and eliminating this Soviet shooter. But they operated under a massive disadvantage. They didn't know they were looking for a woman. German military thinking didn't account for female snipers. So they searched for male positions, male patterns, male thinking. And Lyudmila, who was none of those things, stayed hidden, kept shooting, kept killing. One evening in November, Lyudmila was paired with another Soviet sniper, a man named Leonid. He was experienced, with 47 confirmed kills, and he treated her as an equal, a rarity in the male-dominated sniper community. They were assigned to eliminate a particularly troublesome German mortar team that was shelling Soviet positions. The mortars were mobile, repositioning frequently, making them difficult targets. Lyudmila and Leonid spent 3 days tracking the mortar team's patterns, identifying their likely firing positions, waiting for the moment when the crew would be exposed long enough for shots. On the third day, the opportunity came. The mortar team set up in a partially destroyed courtyard, visible for perhaps 90 seconds, before they would be ready to fire and then relocate. "I'll take the gunner," Leonid whispered. "You take the loader. On my shot." Lyudmila nodded, finding her target through her scope. 2 men, 380 meters away, moving with trained efficiency. Leonid fired. His target dropped. Lyudmila fired a fraction of a second later. Her target fell. The mortar team was neutralized. The operation was perfect. But as they prepared to relocate, German counter-fire erupted. They had been spotted, likely by a counter-sniper team that had been waiting for exactly this moment. Bullets chewed into the rubble around them. Leonid was hit. A round through his leg. He couldn't move. Lyudmila had a choice: retreat and survive, or stay and try to evacuate a wounded comrade while under direct fire. She stayed. She returned fire, suppressing the German position long enough to drag Leonid into cover. Then she carried him, a man who outweighed her by 50 pounds, back through 200 meters of contested ground to Soviet lines. Medics took Leonid. He would survive, would return to sniping after recovery. But the incident crystallized something important. Lyudmila wasn't just a skilled shooter. She was a soldier in every sense, willing to risk her life for comrades, performing under pressure that broke most people. By December 1941, Odessa had been evacuated. The city couldn't be held. Soviet forces withdrew across the Black Sea to Sevastopol in Crimea. The siege shifted to a new location, but the fighting continued. Lyudmila continued her work, now with a growing reputation. Her confirmed kill count passed 100, then 150. Each number represented a German soldier, often officers, sometimes snipers, occasionally machine gun crews or artillery spotters, high-value targets, chosen to maximize disruption to German operations. The psychological pressure intensified. German propaganda began mentioning a female Soviet sniper, turning her into a villain in their narratives. Evidence of Soviet barbarism, of women corrupted by communism into becoming killers. Soviet propaganda did the opposite, celebrating her as a hero, proof of socialist equality and patriotic dedication. Neither portrayal felt true to Lyudmila. She was just doing a job, a terrible, necessary job. But just a job. The physical toll was enormous. Sniper work meant long hours in uncomfortable positions, often in freezing cold or brutal heat, barely moving, barely eating, always alert. Lyudmila developed chronic back pain from lying prone for hours. Her eyesight strained from constantly focusing through a scope. She lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. But she continued, because stopping would mean German victory, would mean the invasion succeeding, would mean everything she was fighting for being destroyed. In June 1942, during intense fighting in Sevastopol, Lyudmila was wounded. Mortar shrapnel struck her face and shoulder. The wounds weren't life-threatening, but they were serious. She was evacuated from the front lines, officially to recover, but practically to be pulled from combat. Her confirmed kill count at the time of her wounding, 309. 309 confirmed kills in less than a year of combat. It was an extraordinary number, one of the highest of any sniper in the war, male or female. But to Lyudmila, it was 309 German soldiers who wouldn't kill Soviet citizens, wouldn't burn Ukrainian villages, wouldn't participate in the occupation that had devastated her homeland. Lyudmila never returned to combat. The Soviet government, recognizing her propaganda value, sent her on a tour to Allied countries, Britain, Canada, the United States, to raise support for opening a second front, to demonstrate Soviet resistance, to humanize the war for Western audiences. She became the first Soviet citizen received at the White House, meeting President Roosevelt, speaking to massive crowds, giving interviews where journalists asked insultingly stupid questions about her lipstick and whether she wore a uniform skirt. "Don't you think, gentlemen," she said at one American press conference, her patience exhausted, "that you have been hiding behind my back for too long?" The comment made headlines. This wasn't a propaganda construct. This was a woman who had killed 309 enemy soldiers, who had seen horrors that journalists writing from safe offices couldn't imagine, who had earned the right to speak bluntly about what the war actually meant. After the war, Lyudmila returned to her studies. She completed her degree, became a historian, taught at Kiev University. She married again, had a quiet life. She rarely spoke about her combat service except in official capacities. The nightmares, the psychological scars, the weight of 309 lives taken, those she carried privately. She had done what needed to be done, but that didn't mean it had been easy, or that she took pride in the killing. She took pride in the defense of her homeland, in proving that women could fight effectively, in surviving when survival seemed impossible. The killing was just the method, not the meaning. Years passed. Decades. The Soviet Union celebrated her as a hero of the Soviet Union, the nation's highest honor. She appeared in documentaries, gave occasional speeches, became a symbol of Soviet resistance during the Great Patriotic War. But to those who knew her personally, she was quiet, serious, carrying shadows that never fully lifted. When younger women asked her about combat, about what it meant to be a female sniper in a male-dominated military, Lyudmila was honest in ways official narratives never allowed. It was necessary, she would say. Someone had to stop them. I had the skills. I made the choice. But don't romanticize it. Don't think it was glorious. It was brutal, exhausting, terrifying work. And the fact that I was a woman made it harder in some ways. I had to prove myself constantly, had to be perfect when men could be merely adequate. But being a woman also gave me advantages. The Germans didn't expect female snipers. Their counter-sniper doctrine didn't account for us. And that gave me opportunities male snipers wouldn't have had. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. The war took everything from my generation. Our youth, our innocence, our belief that the world could be peaceful. I survived, but I lost friends, family, parts of myself that never came back. The 309 kills, people focus on that number, but I focus on what those kills meant. Each one was a German soldier who wouldn't kill Soviet civilians. Each one was a small strike against an invasion that killed millions. Was it worth it? I don't know how to answer that. It was necessary. That's all I can say. In 1974, Lyudmila Pavlichenko died of a stroke. She was 58 years old. Her funeral was attended by Soviet officials, veterans, and common citizens who remembered what she represented. Not just a sniper with an extraordinary kill count, but a woman who had shattered assumptions about what women could do, who had fought when fighting was considered men's work, who had proven that courage and skill had no gender. Her legacy is complicated. To some, she was a hero who defended her homeland with extraordinary skill. To others, she was a symbol used by Soviet propaganda to justify total war. To modern feminists, she represents both the achievement of women in combat roles and the question of whether equality means equal access to violence. To military historians, she was simply one of the war's most effective snipers, whose gender was relevant for understanding obstacles she overcame but didn't diminish the technical quality of her work. The story of Lyudmila Pavlichenko matters not just because of the numbers. Though 309 confirmed kills in less than a year of combat is extraordinary by any measure, but because of what those numbers represented. She fought in a war where the enemy literally wanted to exterminate her people, where every German soldier was a participant in genocidal occupation, where defense wasn't abstract, but immediate and existential. She chose to fight in the most direct way possible, as a sniper, eliminating threats one by one, with patience and precision that turned her into a nightmare for German forces who never saw her coming. She did this while being told she couldn't, while facing skepticism and hostility from her own side, while carrying the burden of representing all women who wanted to prove they could fight. She succeeded, not despite being a woman, but as a woman, bringing different perspectives, different tactical thinking, different advantages to a role that had been exclusively male. And in succeeding, she opened doors for thousands of other Soviet women who served as snipers, pilots, tank crews, and infantry soldiers. The German army never suspected that their deadliest sniper opponent in the southern sector was a woman. Not until Soviet propaganda revealed it. By then, Lyudmila had already achieved what she set out to prove, that assumptions about gender in combat were just that, assumptions, and that skill and courage transcended every artificial limitation society imposed. As Lyudmila herself said in one of her last interviews, her voice carrying the weight of decades. They told me women couldn't be snipers, couldn't handle the violence, the killing, the pressure. They were wrong. Not because I was exceptional, though I was skilled, but because the assumptions were flawed. War requires specific skills, patience, precision, emotional control, strategic thinking. None of those have a gender. I had those skills. I used them to defend my homeland from an enemy that wanted to destroy it. And I did it well enough that the Germans spent months trying to find me, never suspecting they were looking for a woman. That's the story worth remembering, not that I was a female sniper, but that being female gave me advantages they never anticipated. And that's a lesson about war, about gender, about assumption that echoes beyond any battlefield. That is the story worth telling. Not just the history of what happened, but the lesson it teaches about breaking barriers, about the arbitrary nature of limitations society imposes, about the ways assumptions can become tactical weaknesses. The Germans expected male snipers. They got Lyudmila Pavlichenko. And that expectation violation, repeated 309 times over 10 months, cost them officers, disrupted their operations, and proved that the deadliest enemy is often the one you never see coming because you never thought to look for them. If this story moved you, if these forgotten chapters of history matter to you, please subscribe to this channel. These stories deserve to be told, these lessons deserve to be learned, and your support ensures we can continue bringing these important, often overlooked perspectives from World War II to light. Thank you for watching and for remembering.